Hello and welcome to Greenbytes Wednesdays. Greenbytes Wednesdays is a podcast series where we facilitate critical conversations and steer consciousness when it comes to understanding the impact of our digital footprint across Nigeria's technology ecosystem. We hope that with this advanced knowledge, we can introduce you to some tools, trends, and best practices that can enhance your knowledge about digital sustainability. Are you curious about climate change? Are you a tech enthusiast or a climate entrepreneur? Come on board and learn on this episode as we get on with every conversation of the Greenbytes Wednesday podcast series. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, funded by the UK government through the Digital Access Program. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote and I am glad to be your host. Welcome on board.
Very recently, I read that 100 Nigerians will have to share what an American will use in just a day. And I wonder how this makes you feel. Does it make you think about how much energy access we have or how efficient we are with our energy here in Nigeria? That will be the focus of the conversation today on Greenbytes Wednesday as we look at the topic, innovative approach to energy access and efficiency, and we tailor it here in Nigeria. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. I am your host, and I'm very excited to bring you this episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. What we do on Greenbytes Wednesday is to have critical conversations and stir up within you some consciousness when it comes to the impact of the digital footprint, when it comes to understanding Nigeria's technology ecosystem, and also to help you understand recent knowledge, tools, trends when we speak around digital sustainability. So think of it around the overlap between digital and the tech space, and of course, the very necessary energy demands that goes with it. My guest today is David Arinze. He wears many hats. David, welcome. How would you like to introduce yourself? I don't think I can do justice to that.
Warm greetings, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you so much, Shay, for having me. I'm really excited to be here, to say the least. When I think about introducing myself, who am I? I'm a renewable energy specialist, just that guy that wants to add his own quota towards bridging the energy access gap through cleaner alternatives. And like you rightly said in your opening remark, the disparity is significant. And you ask yourself, what other thing would you be doing if you have an opportunity, the relevant knowledge and platform in order to help meaningfully bridge energy access gap in Africa and even in Nigeria?
Yeah, so, we'll get to that in a bit. And you talked about disparity. So in 2022, Nigeria celebrated what we called the peak when we think about energy access. And what that literally meant was that we had about 60.5% energy access. So 60.5 Nigerians had access to energy. Now, do the mathematics very quickly. We're a country of around 220 million people, give or take. And 60% tells you that we still have over 80 million people without access to energy. If you want to contextualize this, that's about the size of like 8 average European countries. You think of Belgium, Portugal, Sweden, Switzerland, or if you even bring it here in Africa, it's about the size of our big brothers or our neighboring countries, Ghana, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire. And that tells you a lot that Nigeria is still far behind when it comes to energy access, and there is a need to close that gap. But alongside closing that gap, it's also around the question of efficiency. How efficient are we when we think of the energy that we have as present? And not just Nigeria is grappling with this reality. We know that other developing countries, especially on the African continent, are struggling to sort of not get left behind, if we put it that way, as the world continues to develop and rely on energy for that to happen. So, what are the innovative, sustainable approaches that are out there improving energy access, and how can we in Nigeria maximize energy access? That will be the focus of the conversation today. Just before we get on with the conversation, I want to say thank you for joining. Feel free to share with your network. Feel free to share with your network. The podcast is available on all podcast streaming platforms, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to YouTube to SoundCloud, and everywhere else you find the podcast. You'll find Greenbytes Wednesday. And many thanks to the UK government for making it possible for us to steer these very critical conversations and feed into the knowledge base when it comes to the digital ecosystem in Nigeria. David, welcome once again. Let's get on with the conversation. You work in the renewable energy space, and we know that that is one of the many innovative approaches. So just walk us through some of the innovative approaches out there when it comes to the energy space.
Thank you so much, Seyi. I would answer this question in multiplicity of dimensions. One, energy as a platform to meet our heating needs. It's a platform to meet our electrification needs and to meet what our cooling needs. You see, when we approach the subject of energy access, and narrow it down to electrification, people need energy is the oxygen, that powers our lives, health, education, agriculture, industries, you name it. At the heart of it all is energy. At the heart of optimization and effectiveness and efficiency is energy. And now you begin to ask yourself, what are the ways that we can achieve this, especially in a sustainable manner? We have seen quite tremendous programs that have taken place within the country today, led by the government and also by other development partners, and even the private sector. You see that in Nigeria today, we initially had a program by the Nigeria Education Project, which was a single-size program that one engaged directly with the private sector to advance energy access in the country. So companies were given an opportunity, indigenous companies, were given an opportunity to play in a sector where that is usually dominated by international players, build capacity while doing it, strengthen a workforce while doing it, and the likes. So, and we would say there's another program that we're seeing and multiple other interventions that are working in the country today to help advance renewable energy. By virtue of where Nigeria is located in the world, we have significant, sufficient solar radiation. And hence you hear a lot of solar energy, solar this, solar lantern, solar water heater, and the rest of the technologies that exist. There are other renewable energy sources, biogas, hydro, geothermal, tidal, wind. But when you look at the subject of energy, you must first of all understand that you can think about the different sources. But one thing is energy is a business first. And it must be paid for.
Okay, before we get into energy as a business, you also understand the disparity. So I gave the figure that about 60% of Nigeria has energy access. Mm-hmm. But if you look at it, if you narrow it down a little bit, you see that about 80% in the urban area have energy access more. And if you compare it to the rural area, there's a lot more. I mean, the figures goes down. There are lesser people that have, I think, about 40% of people.
So in fact, you have just given me much more context in order to further elucidate what I said earlier about energy is a business. And let me help you understand what I mean, as I also will talk about other prevalent sustainable solutions in the country today. You see, when we talk about the grid, I'm sure some of us are tired of hearing the thing. Oh, the grid collapsed. The grid is no longer standing. As if the grid is on the table and somebody breaks the table. It's a network of generation, transmission, distribution, and before it comes to the house. At the generation stage, maybe its generation is done through gas. It goes through a system where electrons are are stepped up from the generation plant and transmitted through cables and a lot of whole engineering that I don't want to bother us with today. But it gets to the final consumer. When there are so many issues around our grid that you don't get to hear when you're doing when you choose to look at decentralized or microgrids. Grid in the sense that when you see that consumption is higher than what you have being generated, there can be a collapse. When you see that generation is more than what is being consumed, there can be a collapse. So many things can lead to that.
Very quickly, can you put that in context? Because I understand that we generate far more than we can distribute. And that's why the DISCOs, the distribution companies, they cannot collect as much as it's been generated.
It comes down to a business. And now, let me just help you understand. Not trying to exonerate the DISCOs, by the way, but just give you a bit of understanding. Now, electrons come into the house of people. Today, as we speak, across the country, I'm not sure that the DISCOs account up to 10% of Nigeria's population in terms of those who are their customers. And within the same DISCOs, just have that shortfall at the back of it, like out of 220 plus million Nigerians, the DISCOs in the country cannot even say, we are sure of at least 10% of the population. One, that's a problem in its own. Now, within their franchise area, revenue collection sometimes is not even up to 70%. And I'm just trying to be very modest with this figure. So how are you able to keep a business running for where you are not even guaranteeing 100% revenue collection? That is one. Do we have issues around weak grids, poor infrastructure, obsolete infrastructure that need to come into the system, expansion of the network to accommodate the opportunity to wheel more power? Because like you rightly said, if you look at the installed generation today in the country, it's at least, based on the information that we have on the public domain, is over 13,000 megawatts. But I don't think we even have seen up to even half of that being transmitted. So what you even see is that sometimes DISCOs, because of also the revenue collection side is a bit of an issue, there is power to be even transmitted to them, but they are not willing to take because again, whatever they take, they must pay for.
Absolutely.
So that's one. And that's why you see that also with renewable energy, with this, and just talking about that before I move into renewable energy, you see that sometimes some clusters, some rural communities, it will take millions of naira, even billions, to transmit, to build infrastructure that's able to get the grid supplied to them. And so when you look at the unit economics, it doesn't even make sense to extend the grid. Rather, you may need to think about giving a decentralized solution where if you're, instead of extending the grid several kilometers from wherever the grid is terminated, you can size them up, look at what their energy demands on a day-to-day basis looks like, then also consider things like if energy access comes here, how does it catalyze economic activity for them? And make that part of your planning and deploy a decentralized solution for them that can be done by solar mini grids.
Just so we don't dwell on that so much, we're going to move to the renewable energy part of it. And as you do that, I want you to also give an overview of the infrastructures in place when it comes to energy usage in Nigeria, both from access to efficiency. So
if you look at the different solutions that have been deployed, remember I talked about heating, cooling, and electrification activities. You see that typically it's an ecosystem of solutions. You cannot talk about heating without talking about cooling. You cannot talk about cooling and heating without talking about efficiency. Now the question now becomes, what is the individual relationship with access to energy? I'll tell you, in a typical household today, if you are a family of husband, wife, and kids, wake up in the morning, there must be hot water. because you need hot water you need heat at least to get the water ready. You need also heat to get the food that the kids take to the lunch and even get breakfast done. At some point, it gets hot in the sun in the daytime. You need some sort of cooling. So you see that, and take for instance in that same house. I don't want to go into efficiency because efficiency in itself is broad, but think about the fact that in two prongs, there's a way you can build the house that it not need as much cooling. And it's not, because by virtue of the way we are, I don't think that there's anybody that has heaters in their house in Nigeria. I think most of the times we have air conditioning units. But also, you also recognize that even down to the kind of equipment that we use, they tend to consume much more energy or much less energy, depending on how energy efficient those equipments are. So it boils down to ensuring that the typical Nigerian has an understanding of what their relationship is to energy. Because when I was getting to my house, I told myself that all my lights must be LEDs. All the ACs must be energy efficient ACs. All the freezers. Why? Because by that alone, before we started talking about band A, band premium, band senior, before we got into that conversation, I was already spending 3 times less the typical person that would live with the same kind of equipment I had in my house. Why? By just a decision to buy or purchase more energy efficient equipment. You think about it now, David, maybe you have some money to purchase all of this. What of the typical woman who relies on firewood in the market, in the rural communities? Are you talking about LED, all those sort of things? Now, it boils down to what is the education process like? This woman can choose between firewood and a clean cook stove technology. Is she able to meet her heating needs with the clean cook stove technology? Yes. Is she able to achieve what? In fact, we even have today some solutions called thermoelectric stoves that even generate electricity while heating is taking place. But it boils down to
the economic part of
I would get to that.
Yes.
Now that it just boils down to, for example, you want to even get a loan in the country today. It's an uphill task. Sometimes you may ask for my grandmom that may even be dead. But that's why I say you cannot talk about it in silos. It's an all-encompassing thing. I'll tell you that there are some programs today. There are even companies that partner with some microfinance banks and some other financial institutions to allow people adopt these solutions on a pay-as-you-go basis or on a lease-to-own basis. So these things are available. But first and foremost, are people aware that these technologies exist? Are people willing to transition from the traditional way they are used to doing things and their relationship with energy? I cracked a joke a few days ago in a gathering. I said, how do I really differentiate or address the issue of climate change when I like firewood rice? You know, because I've spoken to different chefs, I've spoken to different caterers. They tell you that, there's a way firewood rice tastes. I don't know if I have any witness in the audience. If I do, please leave a comment. You know, there's a difference between firewood rice. So how are we, if we have people that belong to the school of thought, that you must still burn firewood for a particular delicacy? Now think about how people have become accustomed to meeting their heating needs in a particular manner. So all of this starts with education. Myself and a few friends started up a program called Clean Cooking, focused on women. The whole idea is just to ensure that women are able to, because we believe that strongly that women are literally, if you want a home to transition from whatever cooking method to another, target the woman, because they are the ones they are the homemakers. And so this whole program, the whole idea was to ensure that these women, first and foremost, learn and understand how to even make clean cook stoves by themselves. And when they get to understand it, understand the health benefits of using it versus because all of them were using firewood in their homes. And guess what? In just 6 months of running this, I can tell you that over 95% of them have transitioned from using firewood to using clean cook stove technologies.
Because it answers the questions of the economics, the efficiency,
less exposure, even the health benefits.
Absolutely.
It's significant.
Absolutely.
You know, so all of these things boils down to how are you sharing this story and painting this narrative.
Great.
Then you're able to unlock the value that you need.
Great. So let me throw you off grid a little bit. I was very, very sort of short of words when a friend told me that we don't really need electricity as much as we think we need in places like Nigeria. You were speaking about electricity serving the schooling needs. And we were speaking somewhere in Europe at the time. And he said, these guys here in Europe cannot do without electricity because they will freeze to death immediately.
Cold, they need the heaters on.
But we can survive without that form of, eating and electricity. And he was speaking very much on the context of our individual relationship with energy as being a primary need. And I know you've spoken a lot in that time. Maybe in the industrial place, it will be a no-brainer. But how would you respond to this if you were told that Nigerians really, based on an individual relationship, we can do without electricity?
Something as basic as, and allow me to add before I respond, that even the energy that we have available can serve much more people if we are just responsible with our use of energy. For example, you're not using a light, shut it down. Sometimes you see some people, you say, oh, they used to take lives in my place. So if I don't leave this AC on, I want to come back and I want the room to be chill. Is it a freezer? Are you trying to stop fishing there? So there are certain ideas that we need to lose.
Another idea is also this thought of its estimated billing. Whether I turn it on or turn it off, I'll get the bills.
All of those things, and that's why I said that it's quite a catalog of issues, right? Because take for instance, the issue of estimated billing was not on the table. It was pay as you use. Would you like to pay for electrons that you know that you didn't really need? Because think about it again, like from a perspective of being my neighbor's keeper. The fact that I shut down lights or appliances that I'm not using, even though I have access to electricity, means that much more power is made available to the grid to serve other people who do not have enough. Sometimes it's because of lack of the supply is not sufficient. That's why you see that sometimes some distribution companies practice what we call load shedding. So you see that some people tell you, say, for our area, pardon me if you're not familiar with our vernacular, but for this our area, 2 days, and it comes from this time to this time, and they can plan around it. So now that is because if it was sufficient, everybody will have it at the same time. So part of these things are like, we need to first and foremost have a re-education of our relationship with electricity, because when we look at it from that perspective, nobody will tell you. Beyond even now, cost is driving a lot of people. People say, hey, please, off that AC, don't think that'll be bad. Now that is beginning to make people a bit more conscious, the cost factor. But beyond just that, there's a level of awareness that people will have that naturally makes you adopt sustainability practices across board. It's just something as basic as, I'm not going to use nylon bags to carry my items. I'm going to use paper bags. Countries like Rwanda have even legislated things like this. So it's all encompassing. It's all part of our lives, and it's just important that we begin to look at it from that point of, it's a me problem first that I need to address before.
Thank you so much, David Arinze. One key takeaway that I take from this conversation is that we need to have this individual relationship with electricity. And it reminds me of a tweet that Joe Abba, maybe many of you know him, put out. He said he had invited the AEDC, the distribution company in charge of Abuja, to come and evaluate his electricity usage. And they found out that just one AC, air cooling unit, was consuming, I think, about I can't remember the measurement,
maybe
but
900 watts.
About 900 watts, whereas the others were consuming way less than 2. And by disconnecting that, it saved him a cost of I think about 60% cost within a month.
Can you imagine?
So you said that it's important that we have this education, we have this understanding. What do we install in our places? What's the demand? And by making better choices, by putting the very efficient units, we can make more economic sense also.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So David very clearly answered the question that even if all you get is 2 hours, you still have to be efficient because it matters for other people and it makes electricity more available for other people. As we get on with the conversation, I want us to delve into some of the trends in the international energy space. For example, what slice of the pie is Nigeria biting when it comes to being smart in energy usage? Think about smart grid, think about smart homes, think about phones that can control, how much electricity is turned on in the house or turned off. The first time I saw it in Germany, I was very, very impressed. But David, you are in this space. Walk us through some of these smart digital tools that makes energy more efficient for people.
Thank you so much. One of the things I would say, as you continue to leverage technology and the advancement in technology to help meet our day-to-day energy needs, both on the micro and macro scale, you would say that, just talking about smart homes, you see, there are now systems that you can install, in your homes that even help you monitor your energy consumption. And sometimes some of them have that capability to even do remote turning on and turning off. I saw in a video recently where someone, I think it was an electric vehicle advert, and the person, I think it was parked in a garage, and the place began to flood. So others who parked their cars there I think they lost their cars due to the flooding. But for this car advert, I want to believe it was an electric vehicle. He just clicked the button and the car started and the car drove to him and drove away from the flood. That was the way they were trying to market it. And I just smiled because, when you think about the possibilities of things like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, the opportunities are huge and tremendous. I will begin to see the usefulness of some of these things even in our society today. In most parts of Europe, on almost every street, you have an electric car charging port. You see that there is that deliberate nature to even create programs that enable citizens, energy consumers, also contribute towards the grid. And in a situation where their consumption is lower than what is, or in a situation where what they are generating in their own houses is higher than what they need, they're able to sell back to the grid through a net metering program. And they tend to get some money as a result of going green. You even have some countries who have gone to the point where even energy users can choose which source is generating the power that they are using, and there's a lot of effort about educating their consumers. Some utilities even go to the point of saying, hey, electricity tariff is at this price from this time to this time because we are generating with this sort of source and it's much more expensive at this time to this time. So that's sort of, because nobody's trying to punish you with high energy bills. It's a relationship that each person must cultivate when it comes to the technology. So,
like you said, it's a business.
Yes,
and
of
profit
course,
must be made.
it's a business, and those dollars and cents must be able to be guaranteed for you to be able to, guarantee investment into it, scalability as well as sustainability, and ensure that you're able to even have, in a broader sense, an industry. And when you look at also how technology in itself is beginning to drive things, you begin to see how you're able to even have much more energy efficient buildings, energy efficient appliances. So some 10, 15 plus years ago, the kind of freezers you find, when you see them, you know that these compressors are high energy consuming. Once they give you that sound, like they sound like a huge, they vibrate, you know that they're up to something. But now you see that as technology continues to advance, research, learnings are being made, advancements are being achieved within these sectors. You begin to see that you see that a lot of things are being achieved on the efficiency side, where less energy consumption to even achieve much more things. And that is one of the things I would say. So even when it comes to the grid, we are seeing more smarter grid integrations. You're seeing situations where you can even remotely monitor and manage systems. On the grid side, we're beginning to see even much more advanced SCADA systems. SCADA is the supervisory control and data acquisition systems that is now in place and very operational in other parts of the world, can be much utilized here in Nigeria. But again, we take it one step at a time.
Okay, talking about taking it one step at a time, David, I want you to distill first to individuals, then to businesses, and to government some recommendations that you think we need to keep in mind if we have to become more energy efficient.
One, everything. Thank you for that question. Let me say this is a question that allows me dream about what I would like to see in a typical Nigerian. One of them is to be able to consciously check the kind of equipment we bring into the country. Nigeria is not a dumping ground, and make no mistakes about it. We shouldn't be seen as equipments that have been phased out in other parts of the world should be what we should be consuming, because what that does is that we are not able to use them for a meaningful time. That's one. Two, it's energy inefficient. Three, the economic value we lose because it doesn't even have any other second hand or we'll call it third hand value. And also, we stand the risk of suffering e-waste, electronic waste issues. And so it's important that we have this. And also, very importantly to the government, that the government must prioritize is to really give relevant incentives in place to ensure that, to increase the adoption of these technologies. Today, a lot of people are saying, oh, I want to go green, I want to go solar, but it's not so, it doesn't have a cheap capex. The capex is quite high. And so,
the capex, you mean the capital?
Yes, the capital, what it costs you to own that system is quite high. And how many institutions today are giving instruments that make it flexible enough for people to adopt or even purchase the system and pay over flexible payment and go through flexible period of time. So that is another thing that we need to consider, because when there are incentives, it helps drive down the landing cost. Today, even when we talk about going green, we have a few companies in the country working intensely around the PV manufacturing, inverter manufacturing, battery manufacturing, and the list goes on. But when we look at our demand for those things versus even what our local market can supply, you know that we have to rely on importation. And when you rely heavily on importation, you ask yourself, how can even the local companies compete favorably? How can we create jobs for our people? How can we even create an opportunity for people to gain knowledge and even build on existing knowledge for a better outcome in the future? So we mortgage ourselves by so many things, and even those. So it's two-pronged, because we also want to encourage a local industry through relevant policies, but also want to be able to ensure that whatever is coming through our borders is one that meets global standards. And also, knowing fully well that we want to transition to cleaner fuels, we should encourage doing business within the cleaner fuels industry and ensure we put certain taxes or call it duties in place that discourage the adoption of fuels that are not clean. Because at the end of the day, if we agree as a country that we want to achieve net zero by 2060, we have to be that intentional.
Got it. We have to be that intentional. Just before we take this conversation home, David, I want you to think about, you've made a lot of reference to renewable energy. And for many of these, and just now you talk about local production, and this means we have to mine some resources, think about lithium ion batteries that are more efficient than lead, think about zinc, think about copper. What if you had to just very quickly reflect on the relationship between this advancement towards renewable energy and the impact on our environments? How would you reflect on this?
In fact, there was a part two I wanted to get to in my response to you, which this question has given me an opportunity to, which is when we think about, even they're called critical energy minerals, mineral resources. And yes, for us to achieve certain things, some mining activities need to happen. But there's something called ethical mining. And that one should be encouraged too. The government should work assiduously to ensure that we are not just mining our resources and throwing it out. The implication of that is we will still buy back the final products at least 3 or 4 or even 5x the price for which we exported that mineral. So this should be an indicator for us to think about the industries we can create within the shores of the country. One, for the value that it presents, the economic value, the FX value is huge. The jobs that could be created, the level of knowledge that could be gotten from advanced countries. So on that value chain, it is huge. But also, it's also important that every equipment, I know SON, the Standards Organization of Nigeria, is working strongly on a few things, but every equipment, every e-equipment must have a program for its recycling, be it phones, be it PVs. And when I say PVs, like solar photovoltaics and panels, PV panels, batteries, inverters, because no equipment will last forever. So they will get to their end life and they will have to be decommissioned. If we do not properly dispose those things, they come back to haunt us. Back so many years ago, we were able to see that there was lead poisoning in some rural communities. Why? Because batteries, lead acid batteries, were wrongly recycled and informally recycled. And so this led to a lot of environmental degradation. So it's not even only crude oil exploration that is leading to. So this can also have its own huge impact. So we need to also look at it from that perspective, but also very importantly, as we think about the subject of recycling, and we should be able to encourage, because there's also value there. So if there are some industries that we can bring in today, if you look at the country today, how many companies are even in the subject of e-recycling? Most that you say is, okay, there's pet recycling, but what of e-recycling? It's also a huge market that should be leveraged. And sometimes, I'm sorry, I know we're running out of time, but just even thinking about it, I've seen companies in Nigeria today that tend to give equipment that are being discarded second life use. For example, you see that a battery on a laptop runs down and you have to buy a new one. When you open up that battery and check it out, not all the cells are completely gone. Some of them may be working, but by virtue of the technology, when one is out, you already have an underperformance. By recycling that, you can also create a new product completely. By testing. So there are markets and opportunities that even exist within these value chains that can be leveraged if government and people are willing to come together to explore them.
So much to take home from this conversation. And my last question will be, what should be the take home for the listener? But while you give that a thought, I just want to say, David made reference to e-waste, digital waste also. And we've had episodes that is sort of bordering around digital waste, around recycling. So feel free to check them out. And he talked about the challenge with the e-recycling or the e-waste recycling. And I must say that even for us, despite our network, it has been very hard to get someone that can fill that gap and speak very confidently on e-waste and recycling of electronic materials. But David, as we take this conversation home, it's been quite a lot. I have learned a lot. What do you think the take home should be?
I think that everyone, everywhere, should understand that we're all interconnected. Your energy use impacts on my energy use. And we first and foremost must adopt a responsible approach towards energy. One, it's a business that must be paid for, and you must encourage others and everyone you know around you that being able to ensure that you ethically engage with the commodity is important for our national development. It presents a huge opportunity for those who want to go into greener alternatives. There's a huge business opportunity that's out there, whether you want to think about it from a PV manufacturing perspective or batteries or inverters or even training or building capacity. In case you're a young person within this space, there are a lot of opportunities for you to build capacity to start your business or to even work within the value chain, whether it's energy policy, whether it's energy engineering, whether it is finance. It's huge. And so I would say that it presents a lot of opportunities. And while it's still at its early stages, there are a lot of challenges that can be mitigated through sustainable mechanisms that can be designed, so that we don't get to a point where we now have loads and loads of panels, loads and loads of batteries who have gotten to their end life. Instead of them ending up in our landfills and even creating issues for us in our environment, they can be recycled and properly managed to create much more value. The impact is huge, but we need to start work from where you are and move on. And if you're in doubt, engage with educative programs like this in order to build capacity, to gain awareness. And I'm sure we're not hard to find.
David, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry I have to jump in here. But just like you said, Offset, these conversations are not exhaustive. Absolutely. We just take a pause on it. And this is where we'll take a pause on this episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. We've been discussing innovative approaches when it comes to energy access and energy efficiency in Nigeria. And if you ask me, this conversation checks the 3 boxes that this podcast series is meant to serve. First, we've been able to have very critical conversations around this issue of energy access and energy efficiency. And I do hope that secondly, we've been able to steer within you some reflective consciousness, especially in your interaction, as David put it, your relationship with energy. And third, we've been able to bring to you some tools, some trends, that helps you understand, smarter options or advance your knowledge when it comes to digital sustainability. And I am so proud of the content of this episode. I also want to say thank you so much for listening, and I hope you will share with people in your network. Greenbytes Wednesday is a part of the Scale for Net Zero program, and Scale here is smart climate awareness, learning, and empowerment. Thanks again to the UK government for making it possible for us to educate the world when it comes to issues of digital sustainability, and to narrow it here in Nigeria. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. It's been a pleasure hosting this. Many thanks to the team, Ayo, Ajibola, Wonderful, and everyone who made it possible for us to bring you this episode. Till the next time, like David said, think about your relationship with energy and make better decisions. Bye for now.
Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. This podcast is brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, thanks to funding from the UK government through the Digital Access Program. Have you learned something new? Please share with your network, share with your friends, as I look forward to hosting you on yet another episode of Greenbytes Wednesday next week. Follow us on our social media platforms, check out our courses, test yourself, see how much you know, how much you're learning when it comes to digital and sustainability ecosystem in Nigeria. And I should remind you that as you balance your knowledge of digital ecosystem, also remember to stay committed to a shared and sustainable planet. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. Bye for now.